My dear friends, I'm writing this from my little kitchen table in my new apartment, and I want to tell you about the hardest chapter of my life. It's a story about love, sacrifice, and learning that sometimes the people we give everything to are the ones who leave us with nothing. My name is Eleanor, and I'm 73 years old. For most of my life, I believed that being a good mother meant putting your children first, no matter what. I raised 3 beautiful kids after my husband passed when they were teenagers. I worked 2 jobs, saved every penny, and made sure they had everything they needed. When they grew up and moved out, I thought my job was done. I was wrong. My husband Robert died suddenly of a heart attack when he was only 45. One morning he was drinking coffee and reading the newspaper, laughing at something in the comics section. By noon, he was gone. The doctor said it was quick, that he didn't suffer. That was supposed to comfort me, but it didn't. Nothing could comfort the hole he left in our lives. Sarah was 16 then, Michael was 14, and little David was only 12. They looked at me with such fear in their eyes, wondering if I would disappear too. I promised them I wouldn't, and I kept that promise. I worked at the department store during the day and cleaned offices at night. I missed school plays and soccer games, but I never missed a mortgage payment. I never missed putting food on the table. I saved every extra penny in an old coffee can first, then eventually in a proper savings account. I wanted my children to go to college, to have opportunities Robert and I never had. I wanted them to never worry about money the way I did during those lean years. Sarah was the first to go to college. She studied education and became a teacher, just like she'd always dreamed. Michael went into construction and started his own small business. David became a mechanic. I was so proud of all of them. They were good kids who grew into decent adults. They got married, had children of their own, and built their own lives. For a few years, I felt like I could finally rest. I had my little house in Queens, my garden, my bridge club with the other ladies from the neighborhood. I read books, watched my stories on television, and enjoyed the peace I'd never had when the kids were young. I thought I'd earned it. But life has a way of pulling you back into the storm when you think you've found calm waters. It started innocently enough. My daughter Sarah called me 3 years ago, crying. She and her husband Mark were struggling to make ends meet in their house in Queens. The mortgage was behind, utilities were being shut off, and they had 2 young children to think about. My heart broke hearing her sobbing on the phone. "Mom, I don't know what we're going to do," she whispered. "The bank is threatening foreclosure. We might lose everything." Sarah had always been my worrier, even as a child. She'd lie awake at night thinking about things that might go wrong. When she called me that day, I could hear that same frightened little girl in her voice. "Tell me exactly what's happening," I said, grabbing a pen and paper. She explained that Mark's construction company had lost several big contracts. The economy was tough, and people weren't building as much. They'd fallen behind on the mortgage, and the bank was starting foreclosure proceedings. They had 30 days to come up with $12,000, or they'd lose the house. "We have 2 little kids, Mom," she sobbed. "Tommy is only 7, and Emma is 5. Where will we go?" I thought about my grandchildren, those sweet babies who called me Grandma Ellie and climbed all over me when I visited. I thought about them having to leave their home, their schools, their friends. I thought about them living in some cramped apartment or, worse, in their car. Without hesitation, I drove to the bank the next morning and withdrew $15,000 from my retirement savings. It was money I'd been carefully putting away for decades, planning for my own future. But what kind of mother would I be if I let my grandchildren become homeless? I had $47,000 in that account. It represented 28 years of saving, of choosing store-brand groceries over name brands, of wearing the same winter coat for 15 years, of never taking a vacation. But it also represented security for my family, and that's what mattered most. I handed Sarah the check, and the relief on her face made every sacrifice feel worth it. She hugged me tight and promised they'd pay me back as soon as Mark got his promotion. I believed her. I wanted to believe her. "This is just temporary, Mom," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Mark's company is bidding on a huge project. If they get it, he'll be promoted to supervisor. We'll pay you back with interest." "Don't worry about the interest," I said. "Just take care of my grandbabies." But one crisis led to another. Mark's company didn't get the big project. Instead of a promotion, there were layoffs. Mark managed to keep his job, but his hours were cut. The calls started coming more frequently. "Mom, I hate to ask, but could you help us with this month's mortgage payment? Mark's paycheck was short, and we're behind again. Could you help us with the electric bill? They're threatening to shut off the power. Could you loan us money for groceries? The kids need to eat." Each time, I said yes. Each time, I told myself this was temporary. Each time, I drove to the bank and withdrew more money from my dwindling savings. I started cutting back on everything in my own life. I canceled my cable subscription and watched only the free channels. I stopped buying books and got them from the library instead. I started shopping at the discount grocery store and buying generic brands. I stopped going to my weekly dinners with my friends from Bridge Club, claiming I was too tired. The truth was, I couldn't afford it anymore. Every extra dollar was going to Sarah and Mark, but I didn't mind the sacrifices. When I saw my grandchildren playing in their backyard, when I watched them do their homework at the kitchen table I'd helped them keep, when I heard them laugh and play without worry, I felt like it was all worth it. My friend Dorothy noticed the changes in my life. She'd been my neighbor for 23 years, and she knew me better than anyone. "Ellie, you're getting too thin," she said one afternoon when she stopped by with some homemade soup, "and you haven't been to Bridge Club in months. Are you feeling all right?" I assured her I was fine, just trying to eat healthier and stay busy. I couldn't tell her the truth. I couldn't admit that I was giving away my retirement savings bit by bit, that I was eating canned soup for dinner most nights to save money. The months turned into years. My savings account went from $47,000 to $30,000, then to $20,000. I told myself it was an investment in my family's future. I told myself that when Mark got back on his feet, when Sarah could go back to work full-time, they'd start paying me back. But the emergencies never stopped. The water heater broke, the roof leaked, the car needed repairs, Emma needed glasses. Tommy broke his arm, and the insurance didn't cover everything. Each crisis required more money from my rapidly emptying account. I started taking on some part-time work to help make ends meet. I did alterations for a dry cleaner downtown, hunched over a sewing machine for hours at a time. My arthritis made it painful, but I needed the extra income. I was 71 years old, and I was working again to survive. Then came the call that changed everything. Sarah phoned me at 7 in the morning, sobbing harder than I'd ever heard her cry. "Mom, they're evicting us. The sheriff is coming tomorrow morning. We have nowhere to go." I felt my heart stop. "What happened? I thought you were current on the mortgage." "We are," she said through her tears. "But Mark's been out of work for 3 weeks. His back got injured on the job, and he's waiting for workers' compensation to kick in. We couldn't make this month's payment, and the bank is calling in the loan. They want the full amount by tomorrow morning, or we're out." I stared at my bank statement. I had $8,000 left. It was all I had in the world, my entire safety net. But I couldn't let my family end up on the streets. "How much do you need?" I asked, though I already knew the answer would be more than I had. $18,000, she whispered. "I know it's a lot, Mom. I know we've already borrowed so much from you, but we don't have anywhere else to turn." I felt dizzy. $18,000. I only had $8,000 left. "I'll figure something out," I said. "I'll be there in an hour." I drove to the bank, withdrew every last cent, and then I did something I'd never done before. I applied for a loan against my house. The house Robert and I had bought when we were young and hopeful. The house where I'd raised my children, where I'd planned to live until I died. The bank approved me for a $10,000 home equity loan. Combined with my remaining savings, I had exactly $18,000. I drove straight to Sarah's house and handed her the cashier's check. "This is it," I told her gently. "I don't have anything left after this." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I know, Mom. I know. We're going to figure this out. You can stay with us until we get back on our feet. We're family." I moved into Sarah and Mark's house the next week. It felt strange to be living with my adult daughter and her family, but I told myself it was temporary. I was helping them get back on their feet, and they were helping me by giving me a place to stay. For the first few weeks, it felt like old times. I helped with the children, cooked dinner, and felt useful again. Tommy and Emma loved having Grandma Ellie living with them. I helped Tommy with his homework and taught Emma how to knit. Mark seemed grateful for the help, and Sarah was less stressed with an extra pair of hands around the house. But slowly, things began to change. The honeymoon period wore off, and the reality of 4 adults and 2 children living in a 3-bedroom house started to show. Sarah started making little comments about how crowded the house felt. "I can barely move in the kitchen with all of us in here," she'd say when I was cooking dinner. Mark would look annoyed when I'd watch TV in the living room. "I was planning to watch the game," he'd say, even though I'd been watching my programs at that time for weeks. The children were told to be quieter because Grandma needs her rest, even though I'd never complained about their noise. I started feeling like I was walking on eggshells in the house I'd helped save. I tried to make myself as small as possible. I did the grocery shopping and cooking. I cleaned the house from top to bottom. I babysat the kids whenever Sarah and Mark wanted to go out. I paid for groceries, utilities, and household supplies with my small Social Security check. I was trying to earn my keep, to justify the space I was taking up. But it wasn't enough. The tension in the house was growing thicker every day. Then came the conversation that shattered my heart. I was sitting in the kitchen, helping my grandson Tommy with his homework, when I overheard Sarah and Mark talking in the next room. They thought I couldn't hear them, but the walls in that house were thin. "She can't stay here forever," Mark was saying. "This was supposed to be temporary." "I know," Sarah replied. "But where's she going to go? She doesn't have any money left." "That's not our problem," Mark said harshly. "We need our space back. The kids need their playroom. I need my home office." I felt my chest tighten. His home office? The children's playroom? I was sleeping on a pull-out couch in the living room, trying to take up as little space as possible. "Maybe we can find her a nice senior community," Sarah suggested. "Something affordable." "With what money?" Mark laughed bitterly. "She spent everything on us, remember? She's got nothing left." "Well, she's got her house," Sarah said. "She could sell it and use that money to find somewhere to live." "That dump? It's probably not worth much. And besides, didn't she take out a loan against it to help us?" I felt my blood run cold. They'd been discussing my financial situation, my future, my life, as if I weren't even a person, as if I were just a problem to be solved. "Look," Mark continued, "I appreciate what she did for us, but we've got our own lives to live. We can't be responsible for her forever. She's my mother," Sarah said quietly. "And she's 73 years old," Mark replied. "She should have planned better for her retirement instead of giving everything away." I quietly finished helping Tommy with his math problems, tucked him into bed, and lay awake on that uncomfortable couch all night. The next morning, I started looking for somewhere else to live. But every apartment I could afford required first month's rent, last month's rent, and a security deposit. I had no savings, no income, except my $800 Social Security check. No landlord would take a chance on a 73-year-old woman with no money. I applied for senior housing, but the waiting lists were years long. I looked into assisted living facilities, but they were far beyond my budget. I even considered moving in with my son Michael, but he lived in a 1-bedroom apartment with his wife and their teenage son. There was no room for me there either. The hints from Sarah and Mark became less subtle. Sarah started leaving apartment listings on the kitchen counter. Mark would mention how much their utility bills had increased since I'd moved in. They began having whispered conversations that stopped when I entered the room. I started spending more time out of the house, going to the library, walking around the neighborhood, anything to give them the space they clearly wanted. But I had to come back eventually. I had nowhere else to go. Finally, Sarah sat me down for the talk. "Mom, we need to have a conversation," she said, not meeting my eyes. "This living situation isn't working out. We need some space to figure things out as a family." "I understand," I said quietly. "I've been looking for a place. I just need a little more time." "The thing is," she continued, "we kind of need you to move out by the end of the week. Mark's mother is coming to stay with us for a while, and we just don't have room for both of you." Mark's mother, the woman who had never lifted a finger to help them, who had criticized their every decision, who had openly disapproved of their marriage, the woman who had never given them a penny but had plenty of opinions about how they should live their lives. She was getting my spot on the couch. "Of course," I said. "I'll figure something out." But I couldn't figure anything out. I had nowhere to go and no money to get there. I spent the next few days frantically calling every senior housing program in Queens, every charity that helped elderly people, every friend I could think of. Nothing. The waiting lists were too long, the requirements too strict, the costs too high. That Friday night, I packed my belongings into 2 suitcases and loaded them into my old Honda Civic. The car was 20 years old, but it was paid for and still running. It was about to become my home. I hugged my grandchildren goodbye, telling them I was going on a little adventure. "Will you come back and visit us, Grandma?" Tommy asked, his little arms wrapped around my waist. "Of course, sweetheart," I lied, knowing that Mark's mother would be sleeping on the couch I'd bought with my own money. I drove around Queens for hours that night, not knowing where to go. I was exhausted, heartbroken, and terrified. Finally, I parked in a quiet residential street and reclined my seat as far as it would go. The car was cold, cramped, and uncomfortable, but it was mine. It was the only space in the world that belonged to me. I slept in my car for 3 weeks. Those were the longest 3 weeks of my life. During the day, I'd drive to different neighborhoods, looking for safe places to park. I'd go to the library to use the bathroom and charge my phone. I'd sit in coffee shops nursing a single cup of coffee for hours, just to have somewhere warm to sit. I'd visit different grocery stores, sampling their free offerings and buying the cheapest meals I could find. I discovered a whole world of people living on the margins. Other elderly people who'd been forgotten by their families, single mothers who couldn't afford rent, veterans who'd fallen through the cracks of the system. We were invisible to most people, but we saw each other. We shared information about where to find free meals, which parking lots were safe to sleep in, which businesses would let you use their restrooms without buying anything. The hardest part wasn't the physical discomfort, though that was bad enough. My arthritis flared up from sleeping in the car. My back ached constantly. I lost weight because I was eating so little. But the hardest part was the crushing loneliness and the shame. I'd given everything to my family, and now I was invisible. Sarah texted me once during those 3 weeks to ask if I was settled in somewhere nice. I texted back that I was fine, doing great, found a lovely little place. I couldn't bear to tell her the truth. I couldn't tell her that I was sleeping in my car in a Walmart parking lot, that I was eating peanut butter sandwiches for every meal, that I was using the bathroom at gas stations and washing my face in fast food restaurant sinks. I couldn't tell her that I cried myself to sleep every night, wondering how my life had come to this. One morning, I woke up in my car to find a police officer tapping on my window. I was terrified they'd arrest me, but Officer Martinez was kind. He was around my age, close to retirement himself, and he looked at me with compassion instead of judgment. "Ma'am, you can't sleep here," he said gently. "Are you okay? Do you have somewhere to go?" I started crying then, right there in the driver's seat of my car. All the fear and shame and exhaustion came pouring out. This stranger's kindness broke through the walls I'd built around my heart. "I don't have anywhere to go," I sobbed. "I'm 73 years old and I'm homeless." Officer Martinez sat with me for a few minutes, letting me cry. Then he said, "Ma'am, I know a place that might help. Would you like me to drive you there?" He directed me to a community center in Flushing that had resources for seniors in crisis. The social worker there, Maria, was an angel. She was young enough to be my granddaughter, but she had the wisdom and compassion of someone much older. She didn't judge me or ask too many questions about how I'd ended up homeless. She simply got to work. "We have emergency housing," she told me. "It's not fancy, but it's safe and clean, and we can help you apply for permanent, affordable housing." The emergency housing was a small studio apartment in a converted office building. It had a bed, a tiny kitchenette, and a bathroom of my own. After 3 weeks in my car, it felt like a palace. Maria helped me navigate the maze of social services. She showed me how to apply for food stamps, how to access the senior food pantry, how to get help with utility bills. She connected me with other seniors who'd been in similar situations. "You're not alone," she told me, "and you're not a burden. You're a person with value who deserves dignity and a safe place to live." For the first time in years, I felt like someone saw me as a human being, instead of just a source of money or a problem to be solved. Slowly, I began to rebuild my life. I started volunteering at the community center, helping other seniors navigate the system. I discovered I had valuable skills. I could fill out forms, make phone calls, and provide emotional support to people who were going through what I'd experienced. There was Mrs. Patterson, who'd been evicted after her son stole her Social Security checks. There was Mr. Johnson, who'd given his life savings to his daughter's drug addiction. There was Mrs. Kim, who'd been kicked out of her son's house after she became too much of a burden. We were all grandparents who'd loved too much, given too much, trusted too much. We'd all learned the hard way that good intentions don't always lead to good outcomes. I started attending a support group for seniors who'd been financially exploited by family members. I learned that my story wasn't unique. There were dozens of us, grandmothers and grandfathers who'd given everything to help their adult children, only to be discarded when the money ran out. The group leader, Dr. Sarah Chen, was a geriatric social worker who specialized in elder financial abuse. She helped us understand that what had happened to us wasn't our fault, but it was our responsibility to set boundaries going forward. Enabling adult children doesn't help them, she explained. It keeps them dependent and prevents them from learning to solve their own problems. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is to say no. It was a hard lesson to learn at 73, but I was finally ready to hear it. 6 months later, I was approved for subsidized senior housing. My new apartment is small but bright, with a view of a little garden. I have my own kitchen, my own bathroom, and my own space that nobody can take away from me. I furnished it slowly, buying things from thrift stores and garage sales. I have a comfortable chair by the window where I can read. I have a small table where I can eat my meals in peace. I have a bed that's mine alone, where I can sleep without worry. The building has a community room where the residents gather for activities. We play cards, share meals, and look out for each other. Mrs. Chen teaches me Tai Chi in the garden. Mr. Rodriguez shares vegetables from his small balcony garden. We've created our own little family, built on mutual respect and genuine care. I still volunteer at the community center 3 days a week. I help other seniors who've been taken advantage of by family members. I share my story because I want them to know they're not alone and that there's life after losing everything. Sarah called me once, about 8 months after I'd moved out of her house. "Mom, how are you? We haven't heard from you in a while." "I'm well," I said. "I'm living in a nice apartment now, staying busy with volunteer work." "That's great. Listen, I was wondering, Mark got a new job and we're trying to save up for a down payment on a bigger house. I know you said you didn't have any money left, but I was wondering if you might have some retirement funds we could borrow from." I felt that familiar pull. The instinct to help, to give, to sacrifice. But then I looked around my little apartment, at the peace I'd found, at the life I'd built for myself. "I'm sorry, Sarah," I said. "I don't have any money to lend." "But Mom, it's for the kids. Don't you want your grandchildren to have a nice home?" "I want them to have parents who can provide for them without bankrupting their grandmother," I said quietly. There was a long silence. Then Sarah said, "I guess I don't know who you are anymore." "I'm someone who learned to value herself," I replied. She hung up. We haven't spoken since. I won't lie. It hurts. I miss my grandchildren terribly. I wonder if they ask about me, if they remember the stories I used to read them, if they miss the cookies I used to bake for them. But I've learned that love shouldn't cost everything you have. Real love doesn't demand that you sacrifice your own security, your own dignity, your own future. Last month, I got a small inheritance from my late sister's estate. It's not much, but it's mine. I opened a new savings account, and this time, I'm saving for me. I'm planning a trip to visit my cousin in California, something I never would have done when I was giving everything away. I've learned that being a good mother doesn't mean allowing your children to drain you dry. It means teaching them to be responsible, self-sufficient adults. By always rescuing Sarah and Mark, I enabled them to remain dependent and entitled. I didn't do them any favors. Sometimes I wonder if Sarah ever thinks about that night when she told me there was no room for me in the house I'd saved. Does she remember that I slept in my car while she and Mark's mother shared the space I'd paid for? Does she ever feel grateful for the sacrifices I made? But those questions don't consume me anymore. I can't control what others think or feel. I can only control my own choices, my own boundaries, my own life. Today, I'm sitting in my sunny kitchen, writing this letter to you. I have a cup of tea beside me, a good book waiting on the table, and plans to meet my friend Dorothy for lunch. Tonight, I'll sleep in my own bed, in my own home, surrounded by my own things. I'm not wealthy. I'm not living in luxury. But I have something more valuable than money. I have my dignity back. I have peace. I have a life that belongs to me. If you're reading this and you recognize yourself in my story, please know that you deserve better. You deserve to be valued for more than what you can provide. You deserve love that doesn't come with a price tag. It's never too late to start over. It's never too late to choose yourself. It's never too late to learn that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is to say no. With love and hope, Eleanor.